The voice of sharing, 旅人那乡。
ASEAN Dailies. First and the foremost news from Southeast Asia.
Hi, this is Arlene.
Good morning, this is Grace.
Of course, you're with us again on our ASEAN Breakfast Call, where we bring you news on our ASEAN Daily.
That's correct, and also we will share news from the Southeast Asia as well as Malaysia as well.
So, Grace, how have you been for your Japanese trip?
Japanese trip was great. Well, Japan is a totally new world, if I need to say. And then there are so many people in Tokyo itself. There are like 30 million people there. So you see people every day, and it's so crowded, even though it's just weekdays.
So it's like sardine can, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, I know Japan has been moving quite forward in terms of its economic and also in terms of its political advancement and progress. But when it comes to countries like Southeast Asia, we are still very much being bogged down by colonial era law. We haven't really made a lot or much amendments, and I'm talking about the Sedition Act. A lot of people might not know that, but the Sedition Act was created I think around 10 years or 9 years before independence. It was created during 1948, was tabled at that time, and it is still here until now, although some of the colonial language has disappeared. But the Sedition Act itself, the essence of or the purpose of Sedition Act is still there.
And also at the same time, it looks like as if the implementation of Sedition Act is getting worse and worse, because the freedom of speech in Malaysia, as much as people want to express themselves via social media and whatever the platform they are having, it looks like it's so monitored by the government that the freedom of speech is getting less and lesser, and it's just the fear that is taking over the people's freedom of speech.
We're actually referring to lawyers and activists that are alarmed at Putrajaya's plan to amend the Sedition Act by denying bail to those charged under the, of course, Sedition Act, which was created in 1948. And the amendments apparently will introduce a new section, which is 5A and 5B, which clearly state that the bail can be rejected for those who have been charged under it. In fact, the Lawyers for Liberties representative Michelle Yesudas, she explained that the bill was part of the Malaysian criminal justice system, which presumed that those charged in court were innocent until proven guilty.
So basically, it's really hard to bail themselves out anymore. And so once they are charged with such an act, there will be charges with such an act until they're proven that they're innocent.
It's really scary to think about it. I mean, anyone can be charged under Sedition Act if they somehow have seditious tendency, which is quite ambiguous in the definition of it if you look through the Sedition Act. But at the same time, I think the most scary part is if you can't be bailed by other people, that means you will forever be charged without having the ability to seek for justice, because under Sedition Act you might not even have the opportunity to defend for yourself in court.
In addition to that, then where is the really fine line between the whether or whatever the person said was right or wrong, if that the particular Sedition Act is very vague and ambiguous. So the person will be just innocently will be charged under Sedition Act if that person really didn't do wrong, but then he's just to say a one word or certain phrases that he might have said it.
And of course, the bill will also seek to introduce a clause which will definitely make clear that any act of inciting any person of group or to demand for the cessation of any state from Malaysia is deemed seditious. Such a demand is already considered seditious under the current act. But if the government continues with this Sedition Act and putting more clauses to it, it will only jeopardize the legitimacy of the government of today, because at the same time, I think states in Malaysia, they of course they have they are part of Malaysia, and they have the right. I mean, the people within the states have the right to speak out for their states itself. But I think the government shouldn't be too erratic on this. They should listen to them rather than just simply dismiss them and saying that they are being seditious just because they say certain things that is deemed or is demanding secession for any state from Malaysia. But to be very frank with you, I think they are mostly referring to Sabah Sarawak, and of course in the case of Perak that time in 2009. But if you look at the bigger picture here, I think people are just looking for avenues to express their dissatisfaction or concern,
because the platforms are getting lesser and lesser for them to express. And then in fact from February to March, around 160 people were charged under Sedition Act.
It's
and
crazy,
that's quite
right?
A lot of people
It's
within those
crazy.
3 months. Yes, that's
and
correct.
one of the most infamous charges is of course the cartoonist Zunar, because he was charged with 9 different charges under
Right.
the Sedition Act, and if it's combined all the different 9 charges together, he might face a maximum of 43 years in jail, and that's scary.
That is scary, and at the same time, we already know the lawyer Eric Paulson was also charged several times before under Sedition Act, which he just simply expressed his thoughts, and then
In Twitter.
on Twitter, and then that's what happened to him. So not only these 2 people, but then also there are lots other people from academicians, journalists, even lawyers. They'll be just simply charged under Sedition Act.
So I guess what we can do is to not tweet anything. Being sarcastic here. Okay, the next news here is a positive one. So apparently Laos and Myanmar is building a bridge, and the bridge is expected to open next month.
That's actually very good news.
Yeah.
And then
I didn't know there's a bridge connecting
Yeah,
Laos
it's
to
like-
Myanmar. I don't even know they have rivers and seas connecting to each other.
But apparently it has been completed. So congratulations to that. And then this bridge project manager, I hope I can pronounce this name correctly, Say So Kam Manotham, confirmed the completion of construction phase of the cross Mekong span some 5 months ahead of the schedule. So which is they actually proceed faster than they planned.
So this is actually part of the ASEAN connectivity blueprint. The blueprint is not really very clear, but part of the requirement of the ASEAN connectivity is to build infrastructure, and of course infrastructure are very expensive projects, infrastructure
Yes.
building. So these are one of the connectivity where they can exchange networks, goods, services and all that between Laos and Myanmar with the bridge. But I mean, to be very frank with you, I'm actually quite impressed that Laos and Myanmar are definitely moving forward economically. With the building of the infrastructure, is definitely going to increase cross-border trade, investment and tourism. But I think at the long run, to foster greater friendship between both countries.
And at the same time, like we mentioned about the relationship between these 2 countries will deepen in terms of exchanging the goods, and also improve the tourism industry from both sides as well.
And the bridge is actually costed 26 million US dollar. So it's not cheap.
Of course, it's not. So it will definitely bring benefits to the countries, and we are looking forward to hearing more improvement from these 2 countries, especially they are in the ASEAN, and also we're looking forward to improve all together in terms of infrastructure and then also technology side.
Talking about technology, of course, the science, technology and innovation is the future of ASEAN. This is according to Surin Pitsuan. If you know, he was the former Secretary General of Southeast Asia, or Association Nations, or he's the former ASEAN SecGen. And he said that ASEAN members countries will have to increase their long-term investment in the development of science, technology, and innovation to be sustainable and competitive globally. And the thing about Surin Pitsuan is he's one of the very rare and very vocal ASEAN SecGen. In fact, even after he steps down, probably he's the only Secretary General that I know the name.
Right.
I can't recall any other Secretary General's name, even the current one. So it seems that he really wants to engage with society, with the community, with the media, and which is a great thing. That's how we gain awareness on ASEAN.
But how is it like all those technology part or digital improvement in Southeast Asia?
Well, you have to ask South Korea how they do it.
But unfortunately, South Korea is not really in the part of ASEAN. But when we talk about the ASEAN itself, we already know the Vietnam, also Malaysia, and also Indonesia. They are really are going forward in terms of technology. Well, how it's just that it's seen very noticeably just by looking at the imports. You know, all those mobile, the electronic devices. It has been improving so much than just a few years ago.
Definitely right. But the problem is when you talk about science, technology, and innovation, it's not just in terms of exchanging materials or skills. It's also about trying to cultivate that culture of science and technology, which means that governments in Southeast Asia need to somehow revamp their education system to be more innovation oriented, and of course not just education system, in terms of governments, corporate and civil society, the culture needs to be based on an innovative or a culture that keep on improvising itself.
And then also the governments of ASEAN really need to promote the interconnectivity and or to build the digital economics, we so called, and that promotes the cross-border trade and also information delivery and also transition from the internet communication system to the more modern technology.
But you know, going back to our first news just now about Sedition Act, about freedom of expression, is somehow connected. You know, when you want to have a country that is progressing well technologically and innovatively, you need to attract great people, and of course attracting great minds means that you need to cultivate a culture where there's ability for people to have free speech. Of course there are responsibility when it comes to free speech, but for simply curbing or simply banning people from saying anything, I think it will somehow slower ASEAN's process to spur the innovation, science and technological development.
Well, we can actually look at it in a few ways. First, I can agree with you that when the freedom of speech is sort of banned in the one country, whereas the older science technology is developing, it will be very contradicting to see, like, you know, the utilization of the older science technology will not be so effective. But at the same time, the government may be looking at the different perspectives. They can still improve those industry, whereas they can still suppress the freedom of speech in the country. But then the connection between these two will no longer be together in the one country when something is suppressed by the government.
So you are taking example of South Korea, I suppose.
One of them.
Well, another success of ASEAN, of course, hinges on interconnectivity. We already mentioned about the Laos-Myanmar bridge, but as an overall focus is ASEAN connectivity has a strong link to ASEAN community, and ASEAN states are grouped into 3 clusters based on income and internet access. Report advises extending internet infrastructure to marginalized community, and also the report will be launched in each ASEAN country to influence infrastructure planning. I'm actually talking about the report. I think it was made for the government on ASEAN connectivity, and what we are seeing right now is we are still quite way behind in terms of ASEAN connectivity. I mean, look at the internet access. In fact, I have this saying that if ASEAN is really, you know, going to achieve the goal that we want. That means whenever we do Skype interviews with any other guests in ASEAN countries, we will have good connectivity. But unfortunately, our Skype chat always have problems.
Yeah, it's either from here or from the other countries, such
Yeah.
as like Philippines or Myanmar or Cambodia, where they don't have the good internet connections there.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that we always find a bit of issues there.
That's true. I think the only country right now that is having good internet access would be Singapore. So, unfortunately, yeah, I use the internet access as the benchmark on how connected we are, on how ASEAN have become a more influencing region in this
Actually, you have a point
in
there.
this world.
Because that could be the standard, line to judge whether the country is actually looking forward to to have the improvement in all those internet connection and the communication as well.
So this is based on the analysis of Andrew Schroeder. I hope I pronounced it rightly. This is what he suggested: the digitalization of social services. We also mentioned just now about science and technology. It can be utilized in civil society activities as well as government's interaction with communities. Anyway, Grace, we will take one short break.
Okay.
When we return, we will discuss more on issues that are that are definitely somehow, any I don't know what to say, but it's somehow related to human rights
All right.
violation in Southeast Asia.
ASEAN Dailies. First and the foremost news from Southeast Asia.
Hi, this is Arlene.
Good morning, this is Grace.
Of course, we are returning back with our ASEAN Daily. Just now I was a bit tongue-tied because actually we are talking about human rights violation, and the problem with Southeast Asia is so numerous of it. And of course, I am talking about what is happening right now in Myanmar. Apparently, powerful Myanmar militia is forcing for a proposed rebel summit. You see, there's a summit for rebels too in Southeast Asia. How cool is that?
And then when it comes to human rights, Arlene, you seem to be very excited and very vocal. I think that's what happened to your tongue ties there. But then, yes, like you said, Myanmar's most powerful ethnic minority, militia, has made a rare invitation to insurgent group negotiating peace with the government to meet at its headquarters. So it's very rare to see this situation, in fact, meeting with all those minority and the government. And that it is very complicated, this ethnic minority politics. And it has been the source of strife for the decades and also remains the potential flashpoint as the country emerges from decades of strict military rule.
But that's the thing. Even you see in former Yugoslavia, after a strict communist rule, and then out of a sudden, there will be situation where minority groups started to be more empowered and take control over the situation in their country. And you are seeing the same thing happening in Myanmar right now.
How is it like when a minority group actually do become pretty vocal and they try to create a summit between the government and them? Is it that effective, and how is usually the result?
I think it will be maybe less effective, but it's the best that the government can do to engage with the military. I mean, to me, dialogue is better than anything else, even swords. I mean, at the end of the day, you want to understand each other, what's the limits and what each other can offer. With Myanmar being a very complicated country, I think a lot of the past historians or anthropologists have predicted if Myanmar were to open up and were to be a democratic nation, the problem with ethnic minorities becoming more independent, becoming more vocal is one of the key areas that Myanmar government has to face one thing or another. In the past, they can always suppress the voices, but now with the opening up, the liberalization of economic and politics, it's not going to happen anymore in terms of government taking full control. The government has somehow it needs to let go of its power and engage more with these ethnic minorities?
I believe that the government of Myanmar is like in the transforming transition from a fully militant government to democratic system, but it still looks like the government is in the full control of everything, and then sometimes they really or forcefully apply roles or policies to the public. So it is actually a good news, I believe, to see this summit between the militia and also the government.
And the thing about these ethnic minorities, for example, the United Wa State Army, they are operating in the northeastern Myanmar Shan state and control zone on both the Chinese and Thai borders. But what's scary about them is they actually once received support and arms from China and has an estimated 30,000 troops. Is led by ethnic Chinese commanders. So you can see that it makes it much more worse when you have outside forces funding these military groups or rebels to fight to create more chaos in the country's internal domestic politics.
That's correct. And in fact, this Myanmar semi-civilian government, which was actually taken the power in 2011 after 49 years of the military rule, it has made ending the hostilities with many groups that have taken up the arms since the independence in 1948, one of the priorities.
And another area that I think Myanmar need to address very clearly, Aung San Suu Kyi has spoken about this many times, she's quite strict on this, which is to amend the Myanmar constitution. And in fact, the US is quite worried about this. In fact, what they are saying is failure to amend Myanmar constitution has raised a lot of question if Myanmar is in fact ready to liberalize its economy and its politics. And I don't think they are ready yet. It seems like they are still very much going backward towards its military regime in the past.
And yes, there are a lot of questions about reformation and also the credibility of whether the government can transform from the long ruled system to something which is quite fresh and new to the country. And also it also matters with people's mindset there as well, because it's pretty much that people are no matter whether people are happy or not, they're used to the previous government system. So it will come, and then they will have to really correct it from the root of the problems and the system itself.
And another thing that U.S. Embassy is in Myanmar, of course, they are pushing for the constitution be amended to allow civilian control of the military and provide the right of citizens to elect freely the leaders of their choice. Because currently, President Thein is definitely from the militant. From the military regime, while at the same time you have 25% of the parliamentarians are militants. And another area that we need to understand, Myanmar for the last 49 years, they have been a military regime. So for them to change dramatically to create wide-ranging democratic reforms, it's almost impossible. But one of the key steps that they can do is, of course, freeing political prisoners and allowing the formation of political parties, which they have allowed with the Aung San Suu Kyi's Democratic Party. So in a way, it's very slow. Hopefully that is going forward instead of backwards.
Will it be ever possible to remove the military role in the political
It's almost impossible.
In Myanmar?
It's almost impossible because you see that in Thailand, no matter how democratic they are still very much having the military to rule over, and that's where you see the military taken over Thailand right now, and self-elect himself, Prayut Chan-o-cha, as the Prime Minister of Thailand. But if you were to see the Indonesian model, you will see that Indonesia has somehow used the method of revolution to completely remove its military regime. Although you see somehow a comeback of the military, not so much, but a bit with Prabowo, nominating himself as one of the candidates for the last presidential election in Indonesia. But of course, Jokowi won the presidential election. But you can see that to completely remove is almost impossible, even in the case of Indonesia.
Because it comes to a matter of the ASEAN standard level when it comes to government system. When the one government is so controlled by the nation government, and also especially when it's controlled by the military militants, it's very difficult to have a clear communication with the one country to the another. And the Myanmar, it looked like at some point it was going forward, but now it looks like it's again the stepping back. So it's quite worrisome when it comes to the communication within ASEAN.
It's quite worrisome, but I think they need to change one thing or another, or not ASEAN will just be a rhetoric. It will not be a reality when it comes to ASEAN community. Anyway, we'll take another one short break. When we come back, we will talk about the Philippines and of course Indonesia's cabinet. Apparently 96.5% of them want a reshuffle.
ASEAN Dailies. First and the foremost news from Southeast Asia.
Hi, this is Arlene.
Welcome back. This is Grace.
Of course, we are talking about our news on ASEAN Daily. So, when it comes to the Philippines, we unfortunately have to say that Aquino should not take the survey of his lack of popularity. Resulting show that public dissatisfaction with his leadership and performance dropping to the lowest level. He shouldn't take it too lightly.
And also his, the president, a personal friend and a political ally, whose name is Francis Escudero, he actually said no words in warning his wedding as a best man not to take the survey result lightly. And that is what the survey said, of course. And it is sort of the snapshot of what people think and feel at a given point in time. So the palace should not just simply brush it off that side and ignore it, for sure.
In fact, the survey that shows Aquino's lack of popularity and people's dissatisfaction about his leadership came almost 2 months ago after a police mission to capture international terrorist Zulkifli bin Hir alias Marwan in Mamansapano, Maguindanao, which left over 60 people, including 44 police commandos from the Special Action Forces, dead.
And also this survey particularly, it was surveyed with 1,200 respondents, and it was conducted from the March 20th to 23rd. And it involved face-to-face interviews with 1,200 adults, and it also had a margin of error of plus or minus 3 percentage points as well. So it definitely shows that how people are not satisfied with the President Aquino. At the same time, his failure in the leadership.
It's interesting to see that countries like the Philippines and also Indonesia, which we'll be discussing in a bit, they are quite active in public survey. And because they are quite active in public survey, people know how popular or how unhappy people are towards the leadership of their leaders. And Aquino, with his misstep on the way he handled the terrorist threats in Mindanao, somehow has dipped his popularity. But in Malaysia, we don't really have such indicators to show people's dissatisfaction.
It looks like it's very secretive, and I think it's a hidden survey sort of. So we talk among ourselves, but then you're right there, we have no public.
You mean we talk among ourselves in Mama?
Yeah. But we don't have a sort of a so-called public survey that is open.
It's quite dangerous because then you have a disconnection between what the leaders are thinking and what the public are thinking, and if you have this disconnection, people will get more and more dissatisfied, unrest will happen, and all things that is negative will happen, and the government would be surprised that it happened. They would be caught in the middle without knowing what to do.
And at the same time, it's up to the government as well how open they want to be and how acceptable they can be. You know, when the public says something, it could be very hurtful or even harmful towards the government. But then Malaysia, I'm so sorry, but we have the Sedition Act coming into this picture, and it's only getting worse. So where will be the connection between the government and the public here?
Well, let's just see. Anyway, another thing that we need to address is the survey of Indonesia. It's interesting that 96.5% of Indonesians want the cabinet to reshuffle. And mind you, the cabinet was personally elected by Jokowi's president administration, and he chose it very wisely to the extent that he actually submitted the names to the Anti-Corruption Commission. But unfortunately, it seems like according to the Public Opinion Study Group, or Kedai Kopi, it suggested that 96.5% of Indonesians want an immediate cabinet reshuffle as a result of poor performance of several government ministers.
And also, the survey was conducted from April 1st and also April 6th. The survey collected opinions of 368 public respondents at the same time. So it was asked the respondents when Jokowi should reshuffle his cabinet. There were around 217 responders, or we can say 58.97%, that President Joko Widodo should reshuffle his cabinet.
Yeah. I agree whatever the public say. In essence, I have nothing else to say. But Jokowi needs to listen to the public as much as Aquino and as much as, of course, our Prime Minister Najib Razak. Anyway, that's all from us today. We will discuss more about ASEAN Daily again tomorrow.
Yes.
But later on, we have a special guest
Yes.
from the ASEAN Business Advisory Council. We'll be sharing.
So stay tuned.